Hello, everyone. We are live, and this is going to be my author's chat of the week. And I will be taking off next week because I will be out at Authors Nation, one of the biggest conferences for indie authors, I think globally, but definitely in the nation. And it's super exciting, and I'm haphazardly actually scurrying to catch up and pack everything and make sure I'm ready for this event. But it's a lot of fun. I can't wait to meet the fellow authors attending. There's definitely going to be a few faces that you will recognize if you are a person who frequents a variety of book talk hubs. You will definitely recognize a few people there. But I'm excited, and I can't wait to get there and start furthering my education on all things books. And let's see if my co-host will try to get him up in just a moment. I know there's always like a potential of a glitch, and I don't know why. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I hear you. I don't see you. I know there's something I think you have to press to kind of invert your camera to look at you, but I don't. There you go.
I'm working on it.
Hello.
Working great. I was able to figure it. Sometimes technology's crazy, but I saw a little icon, so I think this is the first time we've done a dual live with someone, at least in a while. So
That's okay. This is a lot of fun. Now, I will admit, I don't know what happened last week, but somehow it popped up with this multi-screen, and I've not figured out yet how to change it for just back to two. So, sorry that you were kind of minimized there.
that means all eyes are going to focus on you.
That's not the game plan. We're supposed to be equal players for the evening. But hi, how are you? I'm glad you got to come and join with me for the evening.
Oh, doing very, very well. It's kind of funny. I went to message you about something else entirely, and I saw you invited me to do a live a while ago. So I'm glad that I caught up. But I've been a little hit or miss on this app for a while, but glad to be here.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like I will send out random invites to people because anytime I see an author, I'm like, ooh, you're cool. I want to talk to you. I'll send an invite, but no, it's true. There are some people who don't utilize certain platforms or even social media a lot in their author career, and so that's fully understandable. It was just very nice that you reached out. You're like, hey, do you still want to do it? I'm like, yes, I do. Let's talk.
Worked out great. It was perfect. A little late, but hey, better late than never, right?
Exactly. And if you've never listened to one of my lives before, since you're my co-host this evening, I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm Dan Kenner. I mostly write fantasy, so all sorts of different fantasy for middle grade, young adult, as well as adults. And I've dabbled a little bit in sci-fi, but I've never done anything super concrete or hard. I've just written a middle grade. I co-authored a middle grade sci-fi trilogy. So, yeah, kind of fun.
That's cool. Okay, wait, with all these, it sounds, how many books have you written then? Wait, hold on, let's backtrack.
Written versus actual published is a different question, right? So yeah, the writing piece of it, I've written 12 or 13 books. I've published 9 so far. There are a couple novellas in there though, so they're kind of short. But one of the 3 of them are a co-authored series that I wrote with Elle Blaze Hughes. I don't know if you've ever met Elle Blaze Hughes before.
Not yet.
Okay. She's awesome. So it's kind of an experimental thing. We've been friends for a little while. She reached out. Actually, see, she was on my podcast at one point. Then she reached out and said, hey, have you ever considered co-authoring a book? I was like, no, I've never done that before. And it was an experiment, and we had a blast. We published it, and it's been fun. So
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit because I've never co-authored a book. I do think, and I know my own personality, that I'm a little bit of a control freak, which is one of the best things to be if you're an indie author because I control everything and you have to. But because of that, it's so fascinating to me, the concept of co-authoring with someone, because I always want to know, how do you decide who writes what? Are you different POVs? Are you different chapters? Like, how do you figure that out to work together and create a book?
So, I mean, that's a great question. It does depend a lot on the authors. Coincidentally, I'm also an indie author. I've not even I've not even touched the traditional publishing theme because I'm also a control freak. So is Blaze Hughes. I mean, she's also done a very similar. She started a publishing company, right? That's a whole story there. But so it really depends. I've heard other authors doing it differently. In our case, we're both pretty heavy discovery writers, which worked to our favor, right? I came in, I'm a little bit of a heavier discovery writer than her, but I came in and said, look, this is my writing process. You know, I don't edit as I go. I don't really do a lot of planning. The story unfolds for me. She's like, all right, I write a very similar way. So let's just come up with this premise, a starting premise, and then I wrote the first chapter and I sent it to her and she read it and was like, cool. And then she built off of it with her POV and then sent it back and I read it and was like, cool. And we just did that over and over until we had 3 full books. It was just kind of a figure out where we're going as we read the other person's point of view. So it was fully discovery led. It was very, very fun.
That's fun.
We didn't do a lot of playing. There were a couple of places where she's like, all right, you threw some stuff at me that I was like, I don't know where you're going with this. So where are you going with this? And I was like, I don't know really. But, we just had a couple talking sessions. It ended up becoming there are aliens involved with it. So I'll go ahead and disclose that. But, there were just a couple 10-minute conversations when we felt a little lost. But other than that, it was just kind of right as you go with the other POV. So it's kind of fun.
That is fun. I feel like that would be a definitely an intriguing challenge because you don't know what's happening next and then you have to build off someone. I wonder, I could almost visualize, and I don't know how this would work, but like this anthology essentially where they're mini stories but they all build off the prior one by different authors and kind of like based off that idea. That would be kind of interesting, though. I don't know, again, giving up that much of the story development. I could handle that. That would be tough. I did see in the comments that someone popped in saying that they co-authored a book and plan to publish it with a future wife. So congratulations, and I hope that goes well. But yeah, co-authoring is so fascinating to me. Now, when you began writing, like I feel like I've always told stories. Even when I was a child, I developed characters, backstories, well before I put them to paper. And that's always been who I am. What made you decide that today's the day I'm going to sit down and write a book?
A really good question. And I mean, honestly, I've gone my whole life thinking I could never write a book. Just transparently, I've always been a storyteller. I've always, when I was a kid, played with toys differently than other kids. I would literally have continuing stories with these same toys as a child. Yes. And I didn't know that was kind of weird until I was talking to my siblings. I'm like, you have continuing stories.
I'm with you.
They'll last, these stories will last 6 months. Like, they're ongoing stories as a young child. And then someone was like, well, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I adamantly said no, because I'm not very eloquent with my speech. I don't have a huge vocabulary. I'm not skilled in writing. And so I just tabled it. I was like, yeah, I'll probably never write a book. Until I was 28 years old. I started writing actually kind of late. Late is a misnomer, right? I'm not that old. But, I was actually working for my first tech company out of college. And I talked to someone who said she'd been working on her book for 8 years. And I was like, oh, that's a long time. That is impressive. And she said, have you ever considered writing a book? And I told her no, and I gave her the same reasons. I'm not very eloquent. I don't have a huge vocabulary. And she said, well, have you ever tried it? And I was like, no, I've never thought about it. And she challenged me. She said, just sit down for 30 minutes, set a timer and write. Just write and see what happens. And it sounded kind of intriguing. I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. I don't think it'll go anywhere. And then I literally caught the bug in that 30 minutes, right? I was like, oh my God, I need to know what this story means. Like, I just off the cuff wrote this story, and because I'm a discovery writer, the only way to know where it was going to end was to write it. And I haven't stopped writing since that day. Like, every day, I'm just driven to draw these stories out of my brain, and it's been fun. Figured I might as well turn them into books, publish them while I'm at it, and that's what's been happening.
Hey, and then you're gonna inspire other people along the way. You never know who's gonna read your work or hear your story and be like, wow, maybe I can write someday. So that would be kind of cool. And building your own followers, and that's fantastic. And I'm curious because I'm a person that I'm kind of in the middle of the road. I usually understand where the end of the story is going to be before I start writing it. I usually know the players and the main points before I sit down. But as I write, a lot of subplots and backstories and other characters, they all kind of reveal themselves along the way. So I'm kind of like in the middle of the road person when I come to writing. But when you don't know where the story ends, how do you decide where it ends?
That is such a hard question. So I want to pick your brain a little bit more on that because I think most people are going to be a hybrid. There's a scale. There's really no true plotters, really no true discovery writers or pantsers, whatever you want to label it. I tend to lean obviously more heavier towards the discovery writing. And the best way to describe it is there's like this weird intuitive aspect where I know when I get into a story, I don't have to worry about where it's going to end most of the time. My brain somehow just gets there and it feels right and it ends. I will say though, there have been a couple books where I have had some general idea of the ending. With the first book I ever wrote, I knew the final line of the book.
Ooh,
And that was the extent of the ending. I was like, ooh, this is going to be the last line. And so that was all I knew. The rest of it was kind of, I'll figure it out as I go. The rest of my books, mostly, I don't know the ending until I get to about 75, 80, 90%. And I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to end, which is kind of a weird experience, right? Because I've learned to not be nervous. At first, I was really afraid that, oh, this isn't going to work out. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. But I've done it so many times now that I'm like, yeah, my brain somehow like decides the ending before I know it. And then when I get to that point, logically, I realize, oh, this is how it's going to end, and it makes sense. So.
I do like that. And I do think that's the thing is there are people, there are a lot of us as authors who worry about how are we going to wrap up whatever we're working on? How is this going to happen? And we all hit that aha moment at some point or another. Some are very early, some are really late, and all that is fine. It just depends on you and the story. And I've had it kind of vary a little bit because where I thought maybe one book would end, sometimes it shifted and middle of the way through, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's a little, I did not expect that happening, kind of, and it is fun. It is fun, but you do have that moment in your brain where it clicks and like, this is it. This is how it's going to end. And going back to, I love that comment that you made about knowing the last sentence well before you got to the last sentence of, I think you said your first book, because I'm about to, in a couple weeks, publish the last book of a series, and the last 2 lines of it I had known for about 3 books. I wrote them down. Once it hit me, I was like, that's it. That's where the series is going to end. It's this, and just jotted them down. And when I finally got to that moment and plugged them in, I was just like, this is sad. I have to say goodbye now.
Though, yeah, there's some satisfaction that comes with those. Just like it's so much more punchy when you're like, I finally get to write these sentences. I don't write out of order. Do you write out of order, or do you generally write in order?
For the most part, it's chronological, in order, or whatever the order is. But yeah, it's telling the story the way people would read it. But there are moments where I am just, I've decided not to fight it, where I'll have a scene or a conversation pop in my head, and it may not happen for a number of chapters or even that book, but I'll take a moment and be like, okay, I'm going to take 30 minutes and plug this down and put it away. So when it comes time and I reach that point, as long as it still pertains, I'll plop that back in and we'll move forward. But yeah, for the most part, I write, according to the story. But every so often, I'm okay with kind of derailing. If something pops in my head, I'm like, I must make this note because I will not remember exactly the way. But how about you?
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say that, and I think it comes down to preference, right? And there's some people listening that may think you have to do something a certain way. When I first started writing, I felt like, there's all these advice books on how to write a book and how to go about doing it. Interestingly, none of those really jived with me. I'm like, that just doesn't feel right. And I'm not saying they're not right. I'm saying they're not right for me. It was whenever I tried to follow them to a T, I just felt weird. Writing wasn't fun. It felt like it was just unappetizing to me. But when I say there's a preference, the more I plan, the less I want to write the book. And that's what feels so strange to me. So like when I get ideas like that, like you described, like, oh, if I don't write this down, I'm going to forget it. It sounds so counterintuitive, and I don't recommend this to anybody. My brain is just crazy. I don't write things down because my philosophy is if it's meant to be in there, I will remember it when I get there. And that's always been the case. There's probably been so many ideas that I've thought of. They're like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Then I just forget and they don't end up in the book. But I don't worry about that because something else goes in its place. This is why I don't recommend this though, because there was an unfortunate incident. I'm not going to complain about a system, but I was using a system to write that was relatively new online. It was supposed to back up what you were writing as you're writing it. Unfortunately, there was a flaw in the system, something with browser cookies. I lost about 35,000 words of one of my books, just eaten my ether. It said it had saved over and over again, but it was lying to me. It hadn't actually saved. So that's tricky, right? I just lost 35,000 words and I have taken 0 notes on what happened. All I have is my memory of what happened the last 35,000 words. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll rewrite it. So it was not even close to the same. Like, it was wildly different. Turned out okay. Like, it worked out great. But if I had actually written down what I was planning, I wouldn't have been to a point where, like, I had to recreate this 35K from scratch because I don't even remember what happened in it. So.
No, I had a kind of a similar experience. It was working through my second book. And the first book was written, wasn't published. It was going through the preliminary edits, and it was still going to take me a little while before I published that one. But I jumped on the second book and started writing. And I was one of those, do not do as I do. I tell everybody I do everything the wrong way. And this is another one of those examples where I never saved anything. I just wrote it down and put it in one place. And it was on my computer, and my computer had a major glitch.
Oh, no.
Everything was gone. I sent this to so many tech people to try to pull and try to save any bit of information off. I was more than halfway through a 120,000 word book, and it was gone. And I was about to go on a trip to visit friends, and I will admit, I was devastated. I kind of curled up in a ball, and I was like, I'm not going. I can't leave the couch. I was in such a sulk mode. All my friends were like, no, you got to get out there, got to get away from that. We'll cheer you up. And they did. And I came back, and I was like, so devastated, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sit back down. It's going to be written because there's no point of like just giving up. And I kind of knew what I wrote. It wasn't going to be word for word or exactly scene for scene, but I knew the general idea. I knew the general big points, and had to just kind of suck it up and start over. So always save your stuff in multiple places. I now email. I have 2 emails. One's work, one's personal. I'll email it to myself so I can always search the send inbox to the arrival and have it. I want to have
Yeah, I'm not very good at backing things up yet. I'm trying to be better about it, even after my experience. It's one of those things where I just get so deep into the writing mindset that I come out of it when I need to get to work or help with my kids or something. I'm just like, oh, I'm in this writing daze, and I forget the admin aspects of just saving it, uploading it, putting it. I used to write in Google Drive. I don't anymore because I know some of you might be thinking, oh, because of AI type stuff. No, it's more I write too long of books. And so interestingly, when you get to about 100, 150 in a Google Doc, they start moving really slow. So it just couldn't keep up with my writing. But someone said, am I the only one handwriting your book? I do not handwrite my book. My brain works too fast for my hands. I can't write fast enough. So I have to type so that I get all excited while I'm writing, and my handwriting is way too slow and sloppy. So
I think I found at some point, I wonder if I still have it. I should have it saved somewhere. If not here, hopefully my parents still have it. My tentative first draft of what, God knows how many years later, ended up being my book, The 12 Tasks. But I knew as a child that I was going to write that book. I just didn't know when I was going to publish it. And so I kind of toyed around with the first couple chapters of it when I was like 13. So I did find those handwritten, which is kind of cool to see. One, my handwriting has improved since then. 2, very different introduction of the same story concept. But no, currently I do directly type, though I have heard people say they handwrite books. I've even heard people say they prefer a typewriter, which kudos to you. That terrifies me because if I misspell, which I misspell things a lot.
Yeah. I'm the sloppiest writer, and like I'm full. That's the one thing is it's something I know about myself. Once I came to terms with that, I could write so much more quickly. With my first book, I spent so much time writing it because I was worried about grammar and spelling and doing it right. Now I'm just like, nah, that's what editing's for. I just like plow through the first, and so I'll be reading back and be like, what on earth was I saying? Like that does not make any sense. It's fine. Like it's part of the experience is going back and editing it. But yeah, I'm a very messy writer, and sure, if I did a typewriter, it would be a mess. I would mess up so much.
And that's the thing is like, and for everybody has to realize, depending on your style of writing, there are people like me. I write very slow, and it takes me a while to plug information on the paper, but once it's done, it's more or less the storyline's there. Yes, there's going to be edits, but it's more polishing edits. It's not plot or anything like that. There were definitely other people who whip through a story and the first draft and the final draft don't even look like the same book. You would never know. And that's what they swear is this by the time they overhaul and do that, because they're just and that's all the editing process is they polish it up. So, and of course, most people fall in between.
Hmm.
Kind of fall somewhere in the in between of that, and that's all well and good. Actually, I have a question for you, Dan, because I know on here you post a lot because you're also, and this just fascinates me, you're also a homesteader, as you say. So you have like pretty much your mini farm. Does any of that end up in your stories, that experience, those experiences? Because the reason why I asked this, because I have always loved animals and done everything from wildlife rehabilitation to fostering to interning at zoos to blah, blah. I've done a lot of things, and it does end up in my books. The fact that I studied animal psychology, I created an animal shifter species because I just wanted to merge the whole psychology of the animal to their humanoid counterparts. So for homesteading, does any of the little elements that you've learned somehow appear in your books?
Surprisingly, not too much. Maybe more than I say. Look, maybe more than I think. I don't know. I don't. I'm a pantser, right? I don't really plan my books out. I will say that I did write quite a bit about goats because we've had goats for years. Goats and their manure, and their eating habits, and stuff like that in the middle grade trilogy that I wrote, the sci-fi trilogy. And that was primarily because someone asked that very thing. They're like, "When are you going to put goats in your books?" I don't know. Let's do it right now. So I just threw the goats in there. I mean, it made sense with the story. It was part of the experience. But yeah, the funny thing is I've heard a lot about people bringing aspects of their life in. Maybe they've got friends that influence some characters, or spouses, or brothers, or whatever that influence their characters. And I was reflecting on that literally just 2 days ago. And I asked my wife. I was just like, does it offend you that I haven't made characters off of you? She's like, no, I'd rather you not write anything. I don't want to know what you would do. And I just think I'm kind of weird in that, right? I draw my inspiration from this like non-existent play. I think that's just like random imagination that comes from nowhere. And so I don't think I've had any of my friends or family read my books and be like, did you write me in there? Because they're not really based off of anything. They're just based off of what comes up as I'm writing it. So I need to be more intentional with that because I do have lots of random experience with homesteading and building structures and ruminants. That's a term for the animals that have a specific idea. And I know a lot about it, right? Because we've had to deal with bloat, we've had to deal with digestive issues. We have a cow whose milk just dropped. We have all sorts of random homestead experience, but I don't know. I've just never thought about putting it in my books before. It's kind of interesting.
No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. Most of the time, my little experiences were unintentional. There was one point where I wanted to write a character that had a dislocated shoulder. And one of my friends had that experience and was a repetitive experience. And so I did kind of like, okay, tell me more. Tell me how this hurts. It was a weird little quasi interview. But after publishing my first few books, I did have some friends sit me down and be like, so who's based off of who? I was like, they're not based off of any of you for good reason. I was like, there are only probably 3 characters that I've ever written that are based off a person. But outside of that, they're just genuinely their own characters, their own people, their own experiences. And that's that's kind of the fun little joy of creating an entity that is its own. That's its own personality and everything. And but yeah. So actually let's go back to characters, because pick one of your series, because you have multiple, and tell me like a little bit about the characters. What's the plot line? Because you gave me some generalities saying you middle grade and fantasy, but I still don't know what these stories are about. So pick one and let's go into that.
So yeah, this is from a business perspective. Once again, I don't recommend this. I've written all over the place, right? Some people say like, oh, I write genre fiction that is geared towards this age in all of my series. I've literally written all over the board. So I could pick any random one of my series and they would be vastly different in terms of what I'm writing. I'll talk about my most recent book just because I think that's a little bit more pertinent perhaps to this life. So I remember I was driving somewhere a year ago or quite a while ago, and I just had this thought. I love the Percy Jackson series. I love the Lorien Legacies series. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's kind of like teenage kids who have maybe they're aliens or maybe they're half Greek god or Roman god or something. I was just like, I wonder what it would be like to be human, half something else, like in a Dungeons and Dragons setting, like half orc, half fairy, half mermaid, those types of things. I know there's been lots of stories around that, but I had this idea to write like a 6-book series that's about 6 teenagers who are half human and half the child of a ruler in this like mystical realm. And so they're literally princes and princesses of these like dragons and fairies and whatnot. And the reason I thought that would be fun is because then I could write each book from a different point of view. So there's 6 different teenagers, there's 6 books.
I like that.
And it's the same storyline, right? But it's just from the different perspectives of the 6 different teenagers. And it's been a blast, right? So there's 3 boys, there's 3 girls, and it's just that each book is the same, it's the continuation of this huge arc over 6 books, but each of them has vastly different personalities. And it's been so fun because they're first person, but each book is so different. It's just really fun. I'm really enjoying it. I just published the first one last month. It's called Dragon Blooded, and I finished 2 more books. I'm working on the 4th. They're just all in editing phases right now.
Oh, I understand that. But congratulations on your latest book, and that series sounds a lot of fun. Where I think I'm trying to think, this may be a first for me of someone I've talked to that has taken the approach of same storyline, but each book from a different POV from one of the main character groups. So I do like that twist on the story. And I love the idea of these kind of fusion or half children. And I know a lot of people are always fascinated going back to D&D. There are like whole races that are half races and stuff like that. And so people are always fascinated about that. So I hope it does very well for you. You said the first one's called Dragonborn?
Dragon Blooded. Yep. I've got it right here. I think the thing that I'm most proud about with this book, honestly, is that I did the cover myself. So, as you know, as
my next cover?
I've had a couple of people ask me, like, and maybe, no, I think I need a lot more practice with it. I've actually done all 6 covers for this series. I haven't shown them quite yet. I'm obviously will reveal them over time. But as you know, an indie author, there's just a lot of expensive things about publishing. The editing, the cover design, multiple rounds of editing, right? The different types. And, cover design, while important, I was like, I just don't know if I can keep popping for this. I need to do something to save on costs here. And I was actually interviewing an author for my podcast, and she said, well, I just started making my own covers. And I was like, what? Okay, let's talk about this. She's talking to me about stock photos and other various things and effects to make her covers. And she guided me a little bit in it. And I was like, well, I'll give it a go and see how it turns out. And I'm pretty thrilled with how they're all turning out. People really like them. So I'm going to keep giving that a try and see if it works. But that was a lot of work to not only write the book, but make the cover for it. So I have no experience too. So keep that in mind.
Hey, I give kudos for everybody who can do it and do it well, because it's definitely a skill to kind of figure out how to create a cover, especially one that's appropriate to the genre and everything, and do it in a way that looks competitive to, anybody else, and not identify them as, oh, this was a home job. So kudos to you. That is a skill I wish I had. I do not have. I am an artist, but totally different artist, and I know that. And so anytime someone asks, do you do your own art? I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't. That is not, those two don't translate the way people think they do. I do not. So kudos. I love that.
Too, so that makes it particularly interesting. So I don't know if there was when I was working on the cover months ago, I did make a TikTok saying like, I've had feedback that the text doesn't match the color scheme of this. So does bronze look better or does silver look better? And I showed the different ones and I got votes from different people. And it was, it was cool to hear people's insight on which one looks better. But yeah, I'm honestly shooting in the dark here because I have no aesthetics when it comes to colors. I don't know what looks good with each other. It all looks very different to me. So it's kind of a fun experience. That helps.
And that's one of those wild experiences that when people are like, oh, you're an author. I'm like, yeah, I'm an author. I am an indie author. That means a lot's on me. And people don't understand to what extent we have on our shoulders. And there's a lot of skills that you have to either rapidly teach yourself or learn how to outsource real quick if you're going, especially on the indie side of publishing. So for you, what was one of the most shocking things when you started self-publishing that you didn't realize that, oh, I need to learn this?
Oh my goodness. The most shocking, there's so many things. I mean, the list goes on and on, seriously. First off, just when I was writing, I hadn't really learned about the different types of editing, right? I knew there was just editing. Editing was important, but the different rounds and types of editing is important. And then getting to the formatting aspects, you don't think about what makes a book look beautiful on the inside and making sure there's no weirdness there, and just the learning curve of figuring out what system to use, how to format it, even putting chapter heading images is just, you got to make sure it's formatted properly, otherwise they look kind of weird. And then, of course, the marketing aspects and even summarizing. Do you experience this? Like, if someone asks me what my book's about, I'm like, I don't know. I know, but I don't know. I have no idea how to put it into words without sounding cheesy or strange or like, because I've written this long, beautiful thing. I know all of the details. Don't ask me to summarize it. I don't know what it's about.
Well, no, I totally understand. I do think a lot of people do deal with that because you write a book and it doesn't matter if it's 40,000 words or 400,000 words, but it's a book. And then you're asked to like summarize it in a paragraph or even worse, a line. And you're like, okay. So I will just say I've gotten better at the paragraph size pitches. I've done these enough where, I'll just be like, or go on podcasts, like you run a podcast and you ask, and I can like, okay, here are the pitches, but they're like, small little paragraphs. But if anybody asks me to like, just do it in one sentence, I'm like, nope, see, I don't know how to do that.
That's like 5 words.
Hard.
Like
Trying to be better, that's hard.
And you've published a number of books, right? You have a pretty decent stack of how many books do you?
I have at the moment 8 full lengths. Those are 2 different series, and as of 2 weeks from now, I'll have 16 novellas of a different series. So 3 different series, and do the math, whatever that is. But yeah, but it took me a while. The first book took me from 10 years from conception of the idea to publication for those for college, and trying to figure out that. Now, publishing is a lot quicker. It's still not as quick as people think. I just have figured out how to, kind of like what you were saying earlier, rotate. One's in editing, one's being typed, one is in formatting. And so it looks like I'm turning them out real quick, but it's not. This has been several years cycle that I just figured out how to build on. So it kind of moves. It's a beast of its own. And as long as I keep going at a certain pace, it keeps going.
Well, yeah, and that's actually honestly something I just learned recently. So it sounds like you learned that quicker than me. I used to be just like, I'll write one book, edit that same book, publish it, write that one book, edit it. And, I realized part of my issue with that is because I'm a pantser, pretty heavy pantser, discovery writer, I need space from my books. so that I can come back to it with really fresh eyes. I think anybody should always do that, but I think my space needs to be like months, 3 to 6 months. I need a pretty significant amount of time away, and I literally forget what I wrote, which is great because then I come back and I'm reading it as a new reader, and I'm like, oh, did I actually write this? So in that 6 month period, I'm like, well, I gotta do something, right? And so I spent some time writing short stories. I don't count my short stories. Short is a little bit of a misnomer. They're all about 15 to 16,000 words.
Maybe like novelette or whatever that middle ground is.
They're, it's short stories is what some people classify them as. But I wrote those for a while, and then I realized like I need to know what the continuation of these stories are. So I'm actually writing 2 different series now. One's an epic fantasy story. I'm kind of scared to go back to that one. it's really big. It's like 6 or 7 POVs during the same book status. It's like 200,000 words, and there's a 4-book series in mine. So I wrote the first book and I need to get back to it. But anyway, that's when I learned like, okay, I need to take these 6 months to write something new. And I found that I was actually finishing something in that period. It's like, okay, cool. Come back and edit this other one. And then when I'm letting my first one rest, I write the next one. And I just kind of created this flow, hoping that I can get a book out every 6 months. We'll see if it works out, but I seem to be keeping pace, which is good. Is that what your publishing schedule is, or do you have a different schedule that you work off of?
It's a little different because I had up until this month was doing a novella series and a full-length series. So I was producing 4 novellas and 1 novel a year, but that's about 2 books. So kind of what you're saying, 2 books a year. It just sounded cool because they were split up, but they're novellas. So I was like, it sounded cool. It was also a strategy to make it look like I was publishing a lot more and made me feel good. but yeah, no, my goal going forward is 2 to 3 books a year. Now I am trying to trend depending on the type of book. Some of them I'm trying to do a little shorter than some of my, 120,000 word books. I'm trying to maybe hit a little closer to the 100,000 mark so I can again try to turn a few out depending on the series and the genre, etc. so on. And kind of like you, I do like to dabble. All of them so far have been in fantasy, the second world high fantasy style, but each book in each series is dramatically different, whole new world systems, all different world building, why do I do this to myself every time? I don't know. I have like this weird interest in tormenting myself, coming up with all these different systems each time.
But I totally get that. I'm a chasing the shiny new thing type of person. Once again, don't recommend being that type of person, but I am. And so, yes, I'm obsessed with complexities of stories. And not that a simplified kind of straight shooter linear story is bad, but I find myself so much more invested in series when there's complex relationships, complex magic systems, politics, religious, whatever you've thrown into this book, I'm like hanging on it when it's complex. And so that's the same with my books. I try to tell myself, I'm going to try writing a 60,000 word book just to see if I can do it. That failed. It hit 100,000. And it was like, well, that didn't work because they just add way too much complexity to the story. I'm like weaving in more conflict and open-ended things that need resolution. And so I need the word count to close it all off. So I need to figure out how to write simpler stories. That's true. I haven't figured it out yet. The shortest book I've written, not including the novellas, those are novellas, but is 98,000 words. And I was proud of myself for keeping it under 100. It was supposed to be 60, but yeah, it was 98. So.
No, that was one of the reasons why I did challenge myself to a novella series, because up until then I was doing, again, 120,000 plus books, and that's great, but you don't turn them around fast enough, and it's hard. It is hard. And so I challenged myself to do a novella series, and that did allow me to get that experience, especially because there was 16 volumes in this, a long novella series, where it got me that challenge of tell your story in a more of a succinct thing, but still make it a rich world building experience with the rich different systems and characters, etc. so on. So you keep it, again, as vibrant as your big books, but told in little smaller bite-sized chunks. And so that was a fun challenge. I'm glad I did it. I don't know if I'll move back to a novella anytime soon, though I know I have future works that are standalones or duologies that are running under 100,000, and then I'm world building 2 other long-term high fantasy series that are going to be some meaty books.
Yeah. Yeah,
Crying.
those are scary. I can't stop writing them though. Like even my first series that I ever published, the shortest one was 150,000. By the time I get to the third book, it was 190,000 words. It was big. So yeah, my first experience writing. But I will point out, your novella strategy for anybody who's listening and is feeling in this place where you're discouraged. You've been working on a book for years and years and years. There's something to be said about finishing something. It's
Mhm.
very encouraging. It feels so good to write the end. And so if you're feeling in this place where you're like stuck or frustrated, seriously, write a short story. I know that sounds so
That's
strange,
true. Challenge yourself.
but I started writing short stories about a year ago. It was primarily rooted in, I don't know if have you ever heard the Writers of the Future competition?
No,
Ever
I
heard of this?
haven't. I'm going to write that one down. I have my notepad.
So, I mean, you have to make sure you're eligible for it. It depends on how much you've sold. They have a definition for when you're considered professional or when you're not considered an amateur author. I haven't hit it yet. I'll just say that, right? It's pretty high. Like, I'm not saying it has nothing to do with published books. It has to do with how many books you've sold over time. So you'd have to look at your metrics and stuff. But every quarter, they accept fantasy and sci-fi short stories under 17,000 words. And I was part of a writing group, and they were like, well, we should just do this for fun. And it's been amazing. Every quarter, when I'm feeling a little antsy about longer books, I'll just take a week. It only takes about a week, maybe 2 weeks to write a short story. And there's just something so satisfying about writing a complete story in such a small word count. The funny thing about me, though, is none of them are done. They're complete stories, but I deem them as prologues to bigger books.
Yes, yes, yes.
I have like 6 or 7 short stories that I'm like, I could turn these into whole series. They're so interesting. I can't seem to write short stories in my existing worlds. I always have to build new ones. So
I have that, or have that, it's not really an issue, but that kind of mentality of anytime I write something, I want it to be new and fresh. And so again, if I feel like I'm getting stuck in certain mentality, I like to challenge myself, shake things up. And recently, I've been trying to write at least 1 short story this year, in a year. And this year, I might be able to squeeze out 2. But that's because I also want to submit to an anthology. So I had to do a bonus one. But one of the fun things that I've done, and this is for any authors and writers out there, this is also a strategy and a good way to connect to your reader base, is pick a platform of your sort, maybe do something similar. I have a Facebook, I call them my VIP readers, my readers group essentially on Facebook. And so they're the people who are a little more into, just instead of like the people who fall onto my Facebook page or just like curious, they're the ones who are a little more interested actually in my writing, or maybe have read my books and are like the actual fans. And so one of the things I do every year is we build a monster together, because I'm world building for a future book series. It's been a long process, but I've told them last year was our first time we did this, and I was like, hey, think D&D meets The Witcher. It's going to be a dark fantasy. I gave them the whole pitch and worked them through several months of building out a monster for the series. And as a thank you, I wrote a short story that they had exclusive rights for a number of months, and then I got to be able to use it to share wherever I want if I so choose. And that monster not only is in their short story, but it's going to be featured in the book series at some point. And so we just finished creating the second monster for that series. So I'm actually working right now on developing that short story. But drastically different animals and entities going to all fit in this story. But they've been very fun because it's like, it helps me when I'm world building. One is an aquatic creature, which I've never really done a lot of aquatic creatures. So I'm like, okay, let's do an archipelago, and getting into some kind of fun scenario that way. And this new one is a forest-dwelling creature. And so I'm coming up with a new series. But I was like, oh, this is a great way to introduce one of the future characters, not the main, but one of the mains, and have a little short story with him and kind of build up interest as I head toward that series in the distant future.
I mean, I love that. I think that's so cool. I've always wanted to. I mean, that's similar to co-authoring. You're co-authoring-ish with a group of people who are putting together this idea of this creature, and it's fun. I think a lot of people worry that writing with constraints of something, like you said, a created monster by someone else. But I just think it's a fun challenge, right? You can give 3 people the same prompt, and they're going to write vastly different stories. And that's what's cool about writing, right? Because we take our own unique experiences, what we've consumed, all the stories we've read and learned about it, and we turn it into something, our imaginations into something. And it's just so amazing. That's why I love reading, and just seeing what other people are writing. But what a fun idea to have that group of people who help you write something. That sounds so fun.
Because it's not just fun as an engagement thing, but now as hopefully reader fans, they're invested. So whenever I get to the point of publishing that book, they'll know they have a creature in it, and they'll be in part of the special thanks as the group function. And, they'll get their, hey, you helped put something in a book, which is really neat for people who have never written a book themselves. Wouldn't you, years ago, well before wouldn't that be cool to see, like, you helped an author and are in their special thanks? That's a neat thing. So it's just a fun kind of a give and take with the reader population and the writer side of things too. But that's just my 2 cents. Now, actually, I looked up and the hour is running by. Let me make sure I ask a couple of the questions I like to ask every time, because if this platform's nice, I'll repurpose this video in my YouTube channel in a few weeks. And so if anybody wants to come back and check on things and rehear something, it's there too. Plus people hopefully can discover you going forward, Dan. But that's the goal. But one of these questions is, where can people find and follow you outside of Book Talk? If they're not on this platform, do you have other socials? Do you have a newsletter? Do you have a website? Where can people kind of keep in the know with you?
That's a great question. I am not a great social media person, so you'll see me social media. There's something where my brain has this like stopgap when it comes to social media. It's completely my own issue. But yeah, if you go to dankenner.com, that's it, dankenner.com, you should find everything there. Got my books. I actually run a podcast called The Casual Author. I just published episode number 140 just this week, actually. So yeah, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, I think 2.5. And yeah, you can follow me there. I have a newsletter where I send all the crazy things that happen on my homestead. Like, I just built a cow house for our cow. I talk about butchering chickens without too much detail. Don't panic. I just talk about all the ins and outs and things you learn of living on a homestead and having animals. And I have a family. I've got 7 kids, so there's stuff going on there that I talk about every once in a while. So yeah, newsletter, podcast, and I am on socials. If you just search author Dan Kenner on anything, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I'm there, Threads, but I probably won't post a lot. So I'm trying to be better about that. I'm just kind of spacey. I don't really have strategy around it, but I'm present-ish on them. So yeah, dankenner.com is probably the best place.
I'm a reposter because it is hard. It is hard to try to come up with new and fresh content on all the platforms all the time. So I do feel I like to do this like rotating thing where if I take the time to make it on one platform, eventually it'll kind of snake its way through others and vice versa. It's all this kind of interwovenness, and I do try. But you're also better than me because I've not made the leap to Threads. I think I was so put off by X that the concept that this was another similar concept, it was just, I've yet to do it. Maybe one day I'll dip my toe there. I have yet to do that.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I pushed the button that said convert your Instagram to Threads. So don't give me too much credit. It was when it was new, they were just trying to get more people over to it. And yeah, I'm on there every once in a while, but yeah, there's the thing about me, and this is primarily my personality, is I love interactions like this. I can connect very well one-on-one with authors. Put me in a group setting and I'm going to be that person hiding in the corner, right? Transparently. I'm just not a group person. And social media for me is a group thing because there's people grouping together on commenting, and that's just not my place. That's why I have a podcast, right? If you're an author, new or existing, you've published 1 book, you've published 25 books, join me on my podcast. I love having conversations, just getting to know you and learning about what things you've learned as an author. Yeah, that's why. And my newsletter doesn't feel as group mentality either. It feels very kind of personal, one-on-one. So I tend to lean more into those, if that makes sense.
I mean, that definitely makes sense. There are a lot of authors that will claim a little more on the introverted side, and so when it's surprising how comfortable a lot of them get on this particular platform because of that. But overall, yes, it's hard for them to be in this group mentality, and they do like the little more intimate conversations and intimate places. And it's one of those love-hate relationships. If there's a whole huge section of the author group that is introverted, yet we have to market our books, which is kind of pushes you extroverted. It's a tough little challenge. Now I am an extrovert, so my challenge. My challenge is like to tell myself I need to like stop working and do other things in my life because I can also be a workaholic. So that's my problem. But don't advise that. But yeah, okay. So one of the other questions, because I rambled too. One of my other questions is, because you have all these different series, you've co-authored, you've written some yourself, where can people get your books and what format? So are you wide? Are you Zon only? Do you do direct? And then what formats are they available in? Sorry, that's a lot of questions at once.
I mean, that's a great question. These are great questions. I've always been wide. It's just a philosophy of my own. And this is not a knock on anybody who's in KU. I think it's awesome if that's working for you. I have always been wide, and I always will be. And part of the reason for that is I don't appreciate how Amazon treats indie authors differently than traditionally published. To ask us to put our books exclusively in there is ridiculous. And so it's a moral thing for me. I don't like that they do that. So mine will be wide. You can get them anywhere. Amazon, Google Play, Apple, wherever, Kobo, and then direct as well. So you have a direct site. It's dankennerbooks.com. There's a link from dankenner.com. But you can buy directly from me. You can do print on demand. I sell signed copies. You can buy the ebooks directly from me as well. You can usually get a better price there. Hint, hint, wink, wink. So the great thing about cutting Amazon out and any other retailer is I can charge less for my books and make more, coincidentally. So that gives you some information about how they take money from us when we publish our book there. I mean, that's fine. It's a business. It is what it is. But yeah, dankennerbooks.com. You can buy direct from me, or Amazon, wherever is more convenient for you. It doesn't matter.
And you said
yeah, I forgot.
Ebook, paperback. Do you do hardcover audio or just ebook and paperback?
I do hardcover on Amazon, but I haven't direct quite yet. That's something I need to foray into. Audiobook, not so much. So one of those things, I want to do audiobooks. I write too fast to produce audiobooks. I would love to record them myself, but who has time for that? And then just the cost. It's one of those things where it's, you know how expensive it is to do audiobooks.
Yes, I do.
Someday I would love to do it, but I write really big books, and when I'm quoted $6,000 to make the series, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll come back to you when I've saved up a little bit more. So no audiobooks yet, but there are some AI generated ones. Once again, I know that makes people frustrated. The intent is not to keep those up forever. That's just like an interim for people who have been itching to read my books but only do audio. So as soon as I have actual audio files, I'll replace the AI with real people. So just haven't gotten there yet. Someday I will.
It definitely is an expensive thing to do, and though there are a couple alternatives where it can be essentially free for the author, there's also downsides of it. For instance, I have 3 different series. This is the whole kind of lift the veil. And 2 of them I pay outright. That means any of the profits that I earn or my own. And then 1 of them, I do a split proceeds where I never had to pay the narrator anything, but for the next 7 years, anything we earn is split 50-50 from just a profit margin. But during those 7 years, I can't move it wide because it's through the ACX to the Audible program. So it can only be accessible through Audible. So that was one of the things, is I can't take that particular series wide, but the other 2 are something that I am now able to distribute through my direct sales thing, but it's pricey. It is pricey.
Yeah, it's very important. So yeah, it really just, life has been kind of crazy. Like I said, I have 7 kids. I work full time to try to fund this, but homestead plus 7 kids, it's a little bit slower on the publishing side of things, but I'll get there. I'm pretty confident I'll get there.
But you're saying it's slower, but if you're talking about turning out 2 books a year, that's not slow, sir.
I don't know. It feels slow to me. It's just because I think I can write much faster. Like I said, I have 13, 14 books actually written, but it just takes me a while editing is not my favorite. But that's a whole different conversation. We could go down that route.
That is very true. And that's the thing is, everybody writes at different speeds, and everybody's process to release is at different speeds because, yes, there's a whole bunch of things that happen after you write the book before it's released. And never judge what you're doing against someone else. You can always challenge yourself to improve your speed or your methodology, but never look at someone else and be like, wow, because I know authors who put out a book a month. Now they also have a big enough business that they have 15 employees under them now because they write a book a month, and it becomes this like cycle. I'm not there. I probably won't be there for years and years. It would be nice to be there. That would be a great thing. But never judge when you hear someone else put out stuff quicker or slower than you. Don't judge them. We're all doing it.
And that's the tricky thing. I mean, comparisonitis, so to speak, is what you call it. But yeah, it's very, very tricky. Particularly I think book talk is tricky as well, just because I love that people share their accomplishments. I think it's amazing. And you just have to look at it from a celebratory standpoint as opposed to a comparison standpoint. And then, it's great to cheer each other on. So it's great to see people doing amazing things and making progress.
Oh yeah, definitely. And let me also ask you, since we have a few more minutes left, for you as well as anybody else who's listening in and wants to chime in, is there any topic you wanted to cover today that we never got to cover? Any questions you had that you never got to ask? I mean, this is that time to do so. And if you have an announcement, sure, throw it out there too.
I don't, actually.
It's okay. You just released a book last month. That's an announcement.
That's true. Dragon Blooded. It's a YA it's a portal fantasy series, so if you're interested in portal fantasy. It's going to be 6 books. So the next book comes out in March. So exactly 6 months. I'm going to do a 6 months release until all 6 books are out. So keep an eye on that. The next one's in editing phase, and I'm just having a blast with it. But yeah, note any topics I may have missed. I intend on having you join my podcast. So come on, hop on over there, and the conversation will be continued on The Casual Author. So take a look at the podcast. If you like encouraging a positive perspective on being a busy author but still making progress, then take a look at The Casual Author.
I love that. And I would be more than happy to attend myself. And yes, definitely be something to look into for anybody who is interested in, again, the writing side and of books. But actually, here's a fun thing for you. So one of the things I've been challenging myself is like trying to tweak. We're going way back to a conversation about how do you pitch your story, your book in a very succinct way. And so I've been testing a lot of things on my platform here with the slideshow function on Book Talk. And so if you look at my page, you'll see a lot of the slideshows. But part of that is for me to try to figure out what catches people's attention. And for Portal Fantasy, I have a Portal Fantasy. It's my YA series. In Portal Fantasy, some people perk up. Another term that's essentially means Portal Fantasy that actually attracts more people. And let me see if I can pronounce it correctly. I think it's like isekai. And I'll have to text it to you. It's a Japanese term, so a lot of people who know manga and anime and all that kind of stuff, it's been a term that's been around for a while, but it means a character transported out of their world and put into another in some mysterious way or some, purposeful way. And that's what it means. And so I've recently started testing that terminology when pitching my book and been drawing a lot of attention. So there you go for your book. I'll have to text that one to you, but there you go. If you pitch it that way, some people that you never probably would have perked up ears with saying Portal Fantasy would be like, wait, I like that.
That turn. I was an anime manga fan when I was a teenager, so not so much anymore. It has nothing to do with, it's just busyness. I got too busy. I don't consider that much. It was a whole hobby. It was a whole thing back then, and time consuming, money consuming, and I've just moved on to other things. But yeah, I've actually heard that term, and I had never even thought about that as applied to this type of thing. So that's awesome.
There you go. That's my tidbit for you. I love throwing random things out, and that's the one that I just discovered within a few days. That both times I've tested that one out, people have been like, "Oh, interesting. Tell me more." I'm like, "Okay, let me tell you about this book series."
That's so cool. Very, very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into some of your books. I admittedly have not read any of your books, but I want to. I need to. So I'll have to go grab some.
Thank you. And likewise, but the thing about me is I'm a very slow reader. As in, I'm still working on the same book now. Mind you, it's one of the Wheel of Time books, but it's been 2 months. I just don't have a lot of time to read for fun because I'm always reading my own books.
No, I'm the same way. I'm a fast reader, but I only read for, I'm an adult and I've got a lot going on, and I have to decide between reading and writing time. It'll often fall towards writing time, but I'll read before bed. The reason I mentioned my age is I fall asleep. So I'll be like, oh yes, I'm going to read this book laying in bed. I'm out in 5 minutes. So that's why I'm a slow reader, is because I'm trying to read right before bed and I go to sleep. So
no, it's right before bed, right when I wake up, and it's both the same thing. When I wake up, I start thinking about, what I have to do for the day, and then I'm like, okay, itchy, I have to get up and move. And the opposite side of things is the last couple nights, I'm like falling asleep. Like it's actually very entertaining. Don't judge the book because I'm nodding off. I'm nodding off because I'm tired.
it has nothing to do with the book and everything to do with just
Life.
Being an adult. It's just I'm tired by the end of the day, but I love to read. If I could just take work off for a few days and just read, I totally would. But it's not realistic. So
I say I would, but the problem is I have so many like random hobbies that I'll be like, I want to do that, and then I'm like, wait, no, I want to go hiking. Wait, no, I want to go do this, and then I give like 5 minutes to everything, and I feel unaccomplished.
Oh, I'm the same way. Yeah, good to know that we're the same in that boat. So encouraging, at least.
Well, let me ask you one non-book question before we wrap up, just because you homestead, and that can mean a lot of things, and I used to raise chickens and did the dairy cattle showing, and I love all of it. But when it comes to homesteading, one thing that I want to do that I don't know if you do you do anything with bees? Because I'm obsessed with the concept of getting a hive down the line, because I make mead on the side, but I want to have a hive of bees, and I don't know anybody. Well, actually, I know one person, but I always want to know more people who can give me insight on beehives.
That is in the list. We haven't gotten there yet. Pigs are next, and then the beehives, I think, are going to come right after that. So it all has a purpose. And we started with chickens, went to goats, went to cows. It's progressing. Pigs are next, just to help with the milk management. We're getting 6 gallons of milk a day, so needs to go somewhere. Yep. But yeah, bees are definitely on the list. We've been wanting to get bees for years, and I think we will. So when we get bees, okay, I'll let you know what that's like. So it's going to happen.
We'll race each other. I don't know if I will be able to beat you to it, but at some point I would love a hive, and I'm just fascinated. Anywho, but thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me tonight and talking about our experiences, our books, and just quirky side things.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, and I'm glad you asked me. So thanks again.
And I will let you know, hopefully it's a win, not an if, that I can repurpose this and on my YouTube channel. And for everybody who's been listening tonight, thank you for coming and joining and hanging out with us. And I do this every week. And Dan, if you ever want to do another one of these, I do them weekly. I plan them in advance as much as possible, but I do them weekly, and I would love to hang out with you. If not on my side, definitely on your podcast going forward.
We'll do that next. But yeah, I'd love to do this again sometime. That'd be awesome.
And for me, it's time for me to take care of my giant dog and walk him. But thank you, and have a lovely night.
Yes, you have a great night as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.